No, this isn't a mistake. If you're going through the countries in order, Iran is supposed to be here. By my count, it's number 123 on the list, 19th in Asia. But as of May 2026, Iran has entered the public discussion. It gets to jump to the front of the line. Now, my focus isn't so much on what's happening now, but how we got here. I've placed Iran in the region of Persica, Greek meaning relating to Persia, an old name for Iran. I'll talk about the name situation and Iran's historical importance. In fact, I'm really excited to do a video about Iran. It's a fascinating place. I wish we met under different circumstances, but let's do it. Geography. Between Mesopotamia and India lies the Iranian plateau, upon which sits Iran. Western Iran is hemmed in by the Zagros and Elborz mountains, where volcanic Mount Damavand stands at over 18,000 feet, 5,600 meters. Along the east, it's the Kopetdag, the Makran Range, and uplands before the Hindu Kush. The plateau itself alternates between ridges and lowlands, namely the Hazaran Massif and the Dasht-e-Kavir, the low plain, and the Dasht-e-Lut, empty plain. The Caspian Sea is the world's largest lake, and the Iranian shore is a thin lowland. The Persian Gulf shore broadens westwards as the Khuzestan plain. Climatically, Iran is largely dry. What precipitation falls is biased during October to May in a Mediterranean pattern. On the slopes of the Zagros, it can be appreciable, and along the Caspian, it's a downpour. The climate becomes semi-arid along the foothills before becoming outright desert in lowlands and the interior. The Gulf shore and interior get very hot in the summer, but cool and chilly in winter. The mountains in north have cold and very snowy winters, and the Caspian shore is temperate, similar to Seattle, actually. Mountains do a good job of compartmentalizing Iran and were once covered in woodlands, though much has since been cleared. To the south is the eastern extension of the Arabian Desert, and along with the interior are barren sand and rock broken by stands of hardy shrubs and salt flats. Along the southwest floodplains lie the Hawizeh and Shadigan marshes. In the northwest, the Armenian highlands are covered in high steppe, prime horse pasture. Along the Caspian shore is dense temperate rainforest. Iran is home to a wide variety of wondrous creatures like deer, gazelle, wild asses, even leopards and cheetahs. In ancient times, lions, tigers, and even elephants called Iran home. All gone. First Iranians. Oh boy, what to do. Iran has one of the oldest written histories in the world, and archaeology takes it back even further. We're going to have to prioritize, and my first priority is explaining the origin of the Iranian people. Early humans first arrived in Iran some million years ago, and Neanderthals are known from 100,000. But based on genetics and archaeology, modern humans, Homo sapiens, arrived later during the last glacial maximum, breaking into Arabia around 60,000 years ago, during the Hyperwars. A basal Eurasian lineage remained behind, while a Neo-Eurasian lineage expanded further into the Levant and Iran. The Neo-Eurasians intermarried with the native Neanderthals, as basically all non-African humans have somewhere between 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. Certainly something to think about. It's not clear if such people inherited any specific traits from their Neanderthal ancestors, but do seem to have originally been dark-skinned. By about 45,000 years ago, these Eurasians split into west and east, the latter going off into the wilds of uncharted Asia. Around 20,000 years ago, at the height of the last ice age, the peoples of ancient Iran have split into three distinct but related lineages: Levantines of the Levant, Caucasians, not the kind you might be thinking of, in the Caucasus, and Iranians. We'll call them Paleo-Iranians so they don't get confused with the modern people. These southwest Eurasians had evolved lighter, but still bronze or olive skin, and were dark-haired, a swarthy folk. Elam. As the Ice Age ended, clever and persistent people in the Near East discovered they could breed plants and animals for desirable traits. Long story short, they acquired cereals like wheat and barley, fruit like dates and grapes, and animals like cattle, goats, and sheep. With steady sources of food, these people settled down and built more permanent communities, though a far cry from the large farms we might be familiar with. This process took thousands of years, and steadily spread to other peoples as an alternative to hunting and gathering, vulnerable to the vagaries of nature. The general rule of thumb is more reliable food increased populations, and they were able to impress farming on others through sheer numbers, with a notable exception, which we'll get to. Agriculture advanced eastwards from Mesopotamia into Iran, visible from the 8th millennium BC. Technological spread often goes hand in hand with cultural spread, and the ancient language of these first Iranians might have traveled with their animals and crops. Dozens, maybe hundreds of languages were probably spoken here, all lost to time. One that had managed to survive long enough to be written down is known as Elamite, the language of a civilization centered in Khuzestan, in the days before much of the plain had silted up by the rivers of Mesopotamia. Elamite has no known relatives, but attempts have been made to link it with the still extant Dravidian languages of Pakistan and India. Genetic studies do demonstrate a relation between the Paleo-Iranians and the ancient Indus civilization. Two other Paleo-Iranian peoples are known from Mesopotamian records, the Gutians and the Kassites, who both successively invaded Babylon in the 3rd and 2nd millennia BC, respectively. We know very little about their origins, though. Anyway, by the late 4th millennium BC, the Elamites had formed a series of city-states, the most important and powerful being Susa. Elam, or Halmtamti, grew up as a Mesopotamian civilization, even receiving bronze working by the 3rd millennium BC, though the Elamites were distinct from the neighboring Sumerians and Akkadians. Elam might have blazed the trade route between Mesopotamia and India. I wish I could talk about Elam more, because their history lasts for literally thousands of years with the rise and fall of their own kingdoms. But we got ground to cover, so let's move on to our next players. Aryans. That's right, I said Aryans, but not that kind. I've actually wanted to talk about these guys for a while now. They are one of the most studied cultures in archaeology because their language evolved into most of the languages of modern Europe, Iran, and India. In the 18th century, it was discovered ancient Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, and Avestan, the ancestor of Persian, were remarkably similar, and their reconstructed original source was dubbed Proto-Indo-European. This language was spoken some 5,000 years ago, though the where is debated. But based on the linguistic, archaeological, and genetic evidence, I lean towards the steppe hypothesis. That being, the crucible of Proto-Indo-European was in the western steppes of Eurasia, specifically Ukraine and the lower Don and Volga rivers. The wide grasslands were ill-suited for farming. They raised cattle and sheep, and had a fondness for dairy. And they also used horses, not riding them yet, but hitching them up to wagons and carts. These people were also talented metalworkers of gold and bronze. For their appearance, they seem to have had pale skin, many with blonde or red hair, and brown but also green eyes. They also tended to be taller and heavier built than farming communities, due partly to their diet. Various names have been assigned to the Proto-Indo-Europeans that are less clunky: Kurgans, the Yamnaya, and Aryans. This term came from the Sanskrit Arya, meaning something like freeman or lord. Arya is what a group of these people, the Indo-Iranians, called themselves when they traveled east some 4,000 years ago to Central Asia. Some later crossed into India, the Indo-Aryans, to whom the sacred Vedas were revealed, written in their Sanskrit language. 19th century Europeans studied these texts and identified the Aryans as some kind of master race of tall, blonde-haired, and blue-eyed supermen, most pure in northern Europe. The real-life Aryans only somewhat resembled that ideal. Anyway, Indo-Iranians going west became the ancient Iranians, different from the Paleo-Iranians we've established already. These Western Aryans were a fierce bunch, their warrior class riding chariots to battle. The reasons are shrouded in mystery, but in Europe, Anatolia, Iran, and India, these peoples managed to impress their culture on the natives already there. This was a slow process, lasting centuries. Europe seems to have been Indo-Europeanized during the Bronze Age, but Iran wasn't finished until the Iron Age in the 1st millennium BC. The Neo-Iranians imposed their culture, language, and social structures, but also went native by adopting agriculture, intermarrying with the locals, and learning ironworking. Thus, the modern Iranian people, born of these two races, came to be. The Aryans reached western Iran at least by the 9th century BC, as they are mentioned in Assyrian texts bedeviling their eastern border, but the civilizations of Mesopotamia, including Elam, proved far more difficult to overwhelm. In the extreme northwest, another Indo-European people had arrived from the west into the highlands that would bear their name, the Armenians. Sometime during this period, a prophet named Zarathustra, or Zoroaster, appeared somewhere in modern Afghanistan and received visions of a great cosmic conflict between the supreme god Ahura Mazda and evil Ahriman. His writings were collected as the Avesta in his old Iranian language Avestan. Zoroastrianism spread throughout Iran, not quite replacing but augmenting the pre-existing religions of the people. Zoroastrianism is still practiced today, being one of the oldest organized religions in the world. But by the 1st millennium, the Iranians were splitting up. The eastern branch stayed in Transoxiana and moved south into the lands of the Hindu Kush in modern Afghanistan. Some also ventured back into the steppes, called Sakha in Persian, but remembered by Greek historians as Scythians. In the western plateau, the western Iranians settled, splitting into different tribes. Among them were the Kurds of the Zagros Mountains, the Baloch east of the Hazaran Mountains, and the Hyrcanian people north of the Elburz Mountains. Others are peoples who left few descendants today, being Carmanians around the Lut and Jazmurian deserts, and the Parthians around the Great Salt Desert. And of course, in the hills between the Zagros and Hazaran were the Persians in the land of Parsa, maybe from their word for pious or devout, called Persia in Greek. But for now, we'll focus on the last tribe, nestled in the valleys between the Zagros and Elburz, the Medians. Achaemenid Persia. The ancient Assyrian Empire under Sennacherib conquered the Zagros Mountains around 700 BC. In response, the Medians, or Medes, formed their own kingdom in 678 BC under Dahiuka, or Deioces, based at Ecbatana, modern Hamadan. Assyria followed this up by sacking and conquering Elam in 639 BC. The country of Anshan escaped, and the local Persians established their own kingdom soon after. The dynasty that ruled it was traditionally founded by Hachemanish, or Achaemenes. King of the Medes, Havushthra, or Cyaxares, expanded his power into Parthia and Hyrcania, and brought the Achaemenid Persians under his sway. 612 BC he destroyed Assyria's capital, Nineveh, earning the Zagros Mountains. 609 BC he conquered the kingdom of Urartu in modern Armenia. Cyaxares' realm is remembered as the first Iranian empire, but as most of the information comes from Herodotus, there are scholars who dispute that such a state even existed. Either way, Cyaxares' son Grishtivaiga Astyages was overthrown in 550 BC by his own grandson Kurush II, king of Persia, known to history as Cyrus the Great. Great he was, as he expanded his domains into Asia Minor, eastern Iran to Transoxiana, Elam, and even Babylonia and Syria. Cyrus is remembered as a powerful warrior, and also a just and tolerant king, taking the title Shah, King of Kings, or Emperor. Cyrus basically invented empire, creating a system of centralized administration for his wide lands, appointing men to rule the provinces as satraps, protectors, while giving them local autonomy. The conquered people were allowed to keep their languages and gods, so long as they upheld the law, kept the peace, and sent tribute, which was considerable. The wealth of the Achaemenid Persian Empire was legendary. Hoards of gold, silver, food, weapons, chariots, horses, and the Persian emperors used this cash to build great cities, a royal road network, and a postal service. So magnanimous was Cyrus, he allowed the captive Jews of Babylon to return home, earning the title Messiah 500 years before Christ. Cyrus himself would fall in battle against Scythians in 530 BC, but his legacy endured. His son Cambyses II conquered Egypt, and his cousin Darayavahush, Darius I the Great, pushed the borders to the Indus River and Greece. Here was the limit, as Darius and later his son Khoshayarsha, Xerxes I, famously tried and failed to conquer Greece at Marathon and Salamis. The empire was the largest the world had yet seen. Cyrus ruled from Pathragada, but Darius built a grand city at Parsa, Persepolis. Babylon was also preferred as a winter capital. And indeed, while written Persian is known during this period, the emperors preferred to administer their realm in Aramaic, the language of Mesopotamia, and of course, later, Jesus. Despite her wealth and power, Persia suffered civil wars. Failure to conquer Greece came back to haunt the Achaemenids when a young but talented king from Macedon, Alexander III, invaded in 334 BC. Despite his namesake, Emperor Darius III was no match for the Macedonian war machine, and offered Alexander the western lands of his empire. But Alexander, hero of men, wanted it all, and led his army as far as the Indus. Alexander destroyed Persepolis in 330 BC, while Darius was betrayed and killed. The Persian Empire was no more, and the last satrap soon bent the knee to Alexander the Great. Hellenistic and Parthian Iran. Alexander famously died in 323 BC, only aged 33, and soon his generals fought over the spoils of conquest. Seleucus I the Victorious established himself in Babylon and secured the wide lands of Iran, though was unable to reunite the realm. These successors, the Diadochi, namely Seleucus of Asia, Ptolemaios of Egypt, and Antigonos of Macedon, fell into an uneasy equilibrium. Thus began the Hellenistic Age. Greek culture, philosophy, language, and even settlers spread across the former Persian world. This happened mainly along the Levantine coast and the far lands of Transoxiana, but also in Iran itself, anchored by Greek soldier colonies. The country around Lake Urmia escaped as the independent Median kingdom of Atropatene, or Adurbadagan, the origin of the name Azerbaijan. The Seleucid kings were unable to do anything about it as their power waned. By 245 BC, the governors of Parthia and Bactria had broken free. Andragoras of Parthia and Hyrcania could enjoy freedom only a little while before a presumably Saka tribe called the Parni killed him and took over his country in 238 BC. Their king Arshak, Arsaces I, became ruler of what is known as the Parthian Empire. Antiochus III of the Seleucids managed to subjugate Arsaces II in 209 BC, but running afoul with the rising Roman Republic meant this ended a short while later. As the Seleucids crumbled, King Mithridates II, brought Parthia to its greatest extent by 95 BC. With a series of client rulers, Parthia re-established Iranian dominion over Iran. From their court in Mesopotamia at Ctesiphon, the Parthian kings had a foot in both the Hellenic and Iranian worlds. By the mid-1st century BC, Parthia was beset by enemies in the east, losing ground, while in the west it had to contend with a new Roman power. The two seesawed, finally settling on the Euphrates as a border. Dynastic infighting allowed King Ardashir I of Persia to fill the void, and in 224 AD he rose up and overthrew Ardavan IV, establishing a new reborn Persian empire. Sassanid Persia. My second goal with this video is explaining Iran's border. We're not quite there, but this new dynasty lays the foundation of modern Iran by codifying Persian culture. Ardashir's father was named Sasan, founder of the Sasanians. Not only did they patron Persian literature and administration as the Achaemenids never did, but tied their state ideology to the practice of Zoroastrianism. Under the Sasanians, the priests, the magi, where we get our words mage and magic from, became agents of the state, and the Avesta was written down. This contrasted with the neighboring Roman Empire, which by the 4th century was predominantly Christian. To be Persian was to be Zoroastrian, to be Roman was to be Christian, and their wars often took a religious flavor. Where Sasanian armies went, Persian culture followed, bringing it into Transoxiana. The court was at Ctesiphon, and after centuries of being the Iranian power base, Mesopotamia became inextricably linked with the country. Lands in Arabia across the Gulf were conquered, making it a Persian Gulf. Khosrow II warred with the Romans, bringing his empire to its greatest extent, with Egypt, the Levant, even driving to Constantinople, almost equaling the Achaemenids. They called this empire Iran-Shar, land of the Aryans, later shortened to Iran, modern Iran. But Khosrow pushed too far and left Iran unprepared for what came next. Like a bolt from the blue, a tide that no one saw coming and no one could stop, washed over the lands of the Middle East, North Africa, and Iran in the 7th century. In 610, a merchant from Mecca named Muhammad received visions from the angel Gabriel. He became the last and greatest of God's prophets, and organized these revelations into Islam, submission to Allah, God Almighty. In their efforts to expand the Dar al-Islam, the House of Islam, Muhammad and his followers conquered all Arabia by 632, when the Prophet died. His successors, the Caliphs, led further conquests into the Roman and Persian empires. After warring off and on for hundreds of years, both were exhausted. They tried, and failed, to hold off the great armies of the Caliphate. After the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah in 636, Mesopotamia belonged to the Arabs. By 651, the last king of Persia, Yazdegerd III, was betrayed and killed, just as Darius III 1,000 years before. It would take decades for the Arab Muslim armies to fully bring Iran under control, but it would now forever remain part of the greater Islamic civilization. Medieval Iran. So, what did Islamic civilization mean? Well, it had to build on the foundations it found. By the mid-8th century, the conquests were largely done, spreading the Great Caliphate from Spain in the west to the Indus in the east, Egypt to Transoxiana. The Umayyad dynasty of Damascus ruled the largest empire in the world, rivaled perhaps only by the Tang Empire of China. At first, while Islam was a message for all of God's peoples, Arabs still held supreme status in the Caliphate, and Arabic was the only language of Scripture. But soon, exhausting their limits of conquest, the Caliphate had to stop, sit, and ponder what kind of empire it wanted to be. Picking up old Roman civilization while in Damascus, the overthrow of the Umayyads by al-Safa began the Abbasid dynasty, relocating to Baghdad. It was a good, central, and rich location, but it meant the Persian influences were inevitable. Being well over 1,000 years old by now, Persian civilization knew a thing or two about running a giant empire, and as Islam spread amongst the Iranian peoples, they were brought into the administration of the Caliphate. At the same time, without the central authority of a Persian king, The Iranian peoples drifted off into new groups. The old Median language split into new ones, Talish along the southwestern shore of the Caspian, Tati in Azerbaijan, and Raji west of the Dasht-e-Kavir. Hyrcanian became the languages of Gilaki in the west and Mazandarani in the east. Kurdish split into northern Kurmanji, central Sorani, and southern Khwaran. The Sasanian era had done a number on old languages like Parthian and Carmanian, which were steadily disappearing. In their place, new varieties of Persian emerged. East of the Dasht-e-Kavir, the land of Khorasan, Persian is called Dari in Afghanistan and Tajik in Tajikistan. Descendants of the ancient Elamites in the mountains adopted their own peculiar Persian as Lurs, and along the coast, Arab traders influenced Bandari. Arabs themselves steadily colonized Mesopotamia, including Khuzestan, known in latter days as Arabistan. Interestingly, historian al-Maqdisi noted a people in the region whom the Persians called Khuzi, whose language was neither Persian nor Arabic, suggesting the Elamites survived as late as the 10th century. A great slave soldier rebellion in the 9th century shook the Abbasids' authority, allowing power to decentralize. Islam then evolved into a unique power structure where, while there could only be one caliph, the emirs they empowered did not necessarily have to obey their secular authority. Challenges to their religious authority came with the Shia movement, originally centered on disputes over caliph succession, but later evolved into more theological disagreements. Rulers would flip-flop between these two branches, both on spiritual and pragmatic grounds. A rival Shia caliph arose in 909 in Africa, while eastern governors vied for control over Iran. This Iranian intermezzo saw the rise and fall of a number of local dynasties such as the Tahirids, the Saffarids, Buyids, and Samanids. During this period, the weakness of Baghdad enabled a true renaissance of Persian culture and literature. These Persianate societies even extended into India with the conquests of Mahmud of Ghazni. One of the most famous Arabic stories, 1001 Nights, is framed by the Persian princess Scheherazade, and originated as an Arabic translation of a Persian story. But it's called an intermezzo, intermission, because it came to an end in the early 11th century. The Saka or Scythians of antiquity had been conquered and assimilated in the early Middle Ages by new faces on the steppes, Turks. Turks came in all kinds, from Kipchaks to Karluks to Oghuz, who terrorized the settled folk at the edges of the great Eurasian grasslands. They were fierce warriors, and Muslim rulers employed them in their armies, often as slave soldiers called Mamluks. One tribe of Oghuz Turks, the Seljuks, who had converted to Islam, were invited by the Samanids of Bukhara to help against their own wars. But in 1037, their Khan Tugril I began conquering Iran for himself. 1055, Tughra replaced the Buyid emirs as the true power behind the throne of the Caliphate, as the protector of the Abbasids. Khan Alp Arslan warred with the Eastern Romans, crushing them at Manzikert and opening Anatolia to Turkish settlement. His son Malik Shah I expanded across all Iran, and in 1087, Caliph al-Muqtadi granted him the title Sultan, sanctioning his conquests. For their trouble, Turks got loot and women, and land. Besides the Turkmen in the lands north of the Köpet Dağ, Qashqai Turks settled the southern Zagros Mountains and Afshari the Hazaran Mountains, while many especially liked the grasslands of Azerbaijan. The invasions of the Turks sparked the First Crusade in 1096, during which the Crusaders were able to take advantage of power struggles in the Turkish court and provinces. A rebellious vassal broke Seljuk power at the Battle of Katwan in 1141, and the empire soon fragmented into rival principalities, one of which was the Kingdom of Hormuz, founded at one of the most strategically important straits in the world. The Seljuks lingered for a time until Shah Tekish of Khwarezmia, or Khwarazm, conquered most of Iran in 1194. These Shahs, which I guess you figured by now is Persian for king, might have restored a Persian empire, but they had the misfortune of encountering and then antagonizing the Mongols under Genghis Khan. By 1221, the Mongols ruled the lands north of the Amu Darya. 1256, Hulagu Khan completed the conquest of Persia, destroying Baghdad in 1258. The Mongol conquests were immensely destructive, leading to the death of tens of millions from war, massacres, famine, and disease. Iran alone might have lost something like 2 million people, and many of its once vibrant cities were reduced to ruin. Möngke Khan's death in 1259 saw a civil war and the fragmentation of the Mongol Empire. In Iran, Hulagu became the Ilkhan, the People's Khan of Iran, beginning the Ilkhanate. 1264, Kublai Khan emerged victorious, but had to content himself with diminished power over western Eurasia. The Ilkhans, as Mongol steppe warriors, held court in the grasslands of Azerbaijan, but worked to rebuild Iran after such a devastating conquest, and converted to Sunni Islam. A 1-2 punch of civil war and the bubonic plague outbreak, the Black Death, in the early 14th century fragmented the Ilkhanate, which limped along in Azerbaijan until put out of its misery in 1357 by the Mongol Golden Horde. The rival Persianists would then suffer the man regarded as the last great conqueror from the steppes, a military genius, Timur the Lame, or Tamerlane, an Uzbek warlord in service of the Chagatai Mongols. In his great warpath he destroyed cities in Persia, Iraq, and India, estimated to have killed 17 million people. Despite his brutality, he was a patron of art and culture in Transoxiana, and by his death in 1405 Iran was once again united. But, once again, dynastic infighting after Timur's death led to civil war and progressive loss of territory to hordes of Turks in Armenia, first Karakoyunlu, the Black Sheep Turks, and then Akkoyunlu, the White Sheep Turks. Uzun Hasan of the Akkoyunlu set up Iran rather nicely by 1471 for another Persian dynasty, the Safavids. Safavid Persia. It has actually been killing me not being able to go as in-depth with Iran's history as I'd like, but we're now in the early modern period, so we can slow down. 1500, Sheikh Ismail, leader of the militant Shiite Sufi Safavid order in Ardabil, had conquered modern Azerbaijan, alarming the White Sheep Turks. Their invasion failed, and Ismail's counterattack led him to conquering all Iran, Mesopotamia, Transcaucasia, and Armenia by 1510. Ismail was a talented strategist, commanding armies mainly of Turks and Kurds, settling many of the latter in the northeast around the Kopet Dag to garrison the frontier against invasions from hostile Turks. Shah Ismail established a centralized, reborn Iranian empire, himself as Shah-in-Shah, most importantly establishing Shia Islam as the official religion not only in Iran, but also Azerbaijan, Iraq, and the Persian Gulf. Despite his autocratic rule and harsh measures to impose Shia Islam, Shah Ismail allowed local communities to organize their own councils and guilds, creating a particular kind of democratic local governance. Sadly, Ismail's aura was deflated in 1514 when the Ottoman Turks under Sultan Selim I smashed the Persians at the Battle of Chaldiran, leading to the loss of Upper Mesopotamia and Western Armenia. Ismail fell into a drunken depression, dying in 1524. I'm sure any map game enjoyer might be able to sympathize with the Shah. The Ottomans returned in force beginning in 1532 in their quest to restore the Caliphate. 1534, Sultan Suleiman I captured Mesopotamia. By 1549, the Caucasus fell. Prince Ismail Mirza counterattacked in 1554, and with both sides exhausted, the rivals had to accept a status quo in 1555. Mesopotamia and the Western Caucasus stayed with the Ottomans, while Iran regained the Eastern Caucasus and Khuzestan. What also troubled the Persians in the beginning of the 16th century were Portuguese ships upon the horizon, who managed to capture several strategic ports in the Gulf, including Muscat, Hormuz, and Bahrain, giving Portugal control of the shipping lanes by 1521. Despite the commercial stranglehold, this gave the Safavid Shahs access to Portuguese firearms. The Safavid Empire joined the Ottoman Turks, the Mughals of India, and the Qing of China as the Asian gunpowder empires, who increased their power on the use of guns and cannons. Shah Abbas I organized a new army of Christian slaves from the Caucasus called Gilman, equipped with guns, reasserting imperial control. He then sent his armies to repay all the injuries Persia's rivals had dealt it. The Uzbeks were crushed, the Portuguese expelled from Bahrain and Hormuz with aid from the Dutch and English, and the Turks fought to a standstill again. Abbas's death in 1629 prevented the return of all Mesopotamia, but in 1639 the Treaty of Zuhab was signed, establishing the western border. From the Persian Gulf it goes up the Shatt al-Arab to before Basra, up some straight lines, thence northwest along the foothills of the Zagros, curving northeast with the Sirwan River's valley, using it as a border a short ways until it travels along the crest of the Zagros into the Armenian highlands, swooping east of Mount Ararat, thence along the further boundaries in Transcaucasia. Iran was therefore able to keep Khuzestan. The Turks and Persians weren't done fighting, of course, but each time they settled back on this border, though it wasn't fully surveyed until the 20th century, remaining under the control of autonomous Kurdish tribes. Abbas I's death marked the decline of Safavid power, as enemies and rebellions undermined the empire, while Shahs became decadent and unconcerned with government. The Russians, now masters of northern Eurasia, teamed up with the Turks and took over large portions of Caucasia and northwestern Iran in 1724. But General Nader, an Afshar Turkish former slave, would win it all back and crush the rebellious Hotak Afghans in the east. Afsharid Iran. 1735, General Nader drove both the Russians and rival Afghan Hotak dynasty from Persia. 1736, he told the Turks to stand behind the Zuhab line before assuming the crown from the young boy king Abbas III. Nader Shah then finished the job in Kandahar and Baluchistan. Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah upset Nader, and he responded with an invasion that ended with the sack of Delhi in 1738. And Nader Shah made off with an enormous amount of treasure, including some giant diamonds. He also took war elephants as trophies. He conquered Transoxiana in 1740 and even built a fleet and retook Bahrain and Oman. 1747, despite ruling one of the most powerful and richest empires in the world, Nadir Shah had become increasingly despotic and paranoid and tried to move against his royal guard. They moved quicker and assassinated him. So passed the last great Asian conqueror, and his empire did not long survive him. Once again, Iran broke apart into rival fiefs, the Afsharid Shahs reduced to their core in Khorasan. Bahrain and Oman broke away, as did Ahmad Shah Durrani, who created the precursor to modern Afghanistan. Kurdish warlord Karim Khan Zand, meanwhile, reunited much of Iran by 1765. Qajarid Persia. Karim Khan died in 1779. Just as a young nation was being born across the Atlantic, a Turkic warlord of the Qajar tribe, Aga Muhammad Khan, took his place. He based himself at Tehran and reconquered the Caucasus and Khorasan. He was a cruel man, massacring people across the land and torturing the last Afsharid king Shahrukh Shah to death, earning him assassination in 1797. The Qajar dynasty survived in Fath Ali, but the Russians saw weakness and pushed to capture the Caucasus, vital for their strategic interests. The Qajar army was no match for the Russian one, and the Treaty of Gulistan in 1813 ceded all the country north of the Lesser Caucasus Mountains and Kura and Aras rivers to Russia. Russia did it again in 1828 with the Treaty of Turkmenchai, pushing the border along the Aras River, south along the edge of the Mugan Plain to the Bulgarchai River, up it and southeast along the southern foothills of the Talish Mountains, then down the Astarachai River to the Caspian Sea. Thus, Iran's western borders were set, and lands part of Iran for centuries forever lost. However, fragmentation in the Afghan Durrani Empire piqued the Qajarid Shah's interest. They tried twice, but the second time in 1856 the British got involved. The East India Company had spent the past century building an empire in India and saw Afghanistan as the gateway to their most prized possession. They weren't too keen on a powerful, aggressive Persia on their doorstep. A short war between the two ended in the 1857 Treaty of Paris, preserving Afghanistan as a buffer between them. Qajar Iran had rather more success against the Omanis, retaking Hormuz 1868, and the Baloch, technically Brahwi, Khanate of Kalat, but the British wanted that buffer and split Baluchistan with Persia in 1871. Starting at Gwatar Bay, the border goes north, then east along the Nahang River, northwards and then westwards along a ridge, north again to the Tahlab River, up it to some ridges, then along northwest. 1872, the line was extended to include Afghanistan, northeast to the Helmand River, down to meet the Jue-Siksar River, then up it before going west to the Kusia Mountain, northwards more or less straight, with a few indentations until it reaches the Hari River. By 1881, Russia had conquered the cities of Transoxiana, and Persia managed to stem the tide by signing the Treaty of Akhal. From the southeast Caspian shore, the line went east to the Atrak River, up then across the Kupetdag Mountains, across another line to the Hari River, down to meet the Afghan border. Britain and Russia were playing a great game in Central Asia, the former afraid of the Russians gunning for India, the latter wanting to protect its soft underbelly into Siberia. The only thing the two could agree on was a strong Persia was unacceptable. It's not clear who won exactly, but Persia certainly lost. Her imperial ambitions thoroughly dashed by Britain and Russia, Iran had little choice but to modernize. Shah Nasser knew Persia's future involved embracing the ways of the West. He invited foreign experts to reform Persian administration, military, education, and imported modern technology like railroads and telegraphs. But these reforms came at a grave cost. Nasser Shah ran up substantial debts to the very powers he was trying to resist, and had to offer generous concessions to stay afloat. Monopolies were granted to foreign companies over things like tobacco, fishing, mining, and most importantly, oil after the discovery of substantial oil fields in Khuzestan, leading to the founding of the Anglo-Persian Oil Company in 1908, the precursor to British Petroleum, BP. All these concessions greatly upset Islamic scholars, liberal intellectuals, and the commercial class. The Shah was selling off Iran's economy for the debt he racked up, philandering both at home and abroad. Protests erupted over taxes on tobacco. Nasser Shah was assassinated in 1896, and his son Mozaffar faced a collapsing state, no longer able to rely on deficit spending and staring down increasingly uncooperative elites. A 1905 protest over tariffs gave way to a 1906 riot, and finally the Shah restricted his power to drive Persia further into economic ruin. The Persian Constitutional Revolution, considered the first liberal revolution in Islamic history, got their constitution with a modest electorate and created a legislature, the Majlis. The pressure must have been too much for Mozaffar Shah, and he died in 1907. His son Muhammad Ali, a different one, tried to rescind the constitution and had the backup of the Russians and British to do so, who partitioned Iran into spheres of influence. Russia took the north, Britain the south. 1908, the Shah moved against the Majlis and sparked a civil war. 1909, the constitutionalist forces captured Tehran, deposed Muhammad Ali, and made his son Ahmad the new Shah. The revolution finally ended when parliament was forcibly disbanded by threat of Russian troops, though a new one was convened in 1914. Shah Ahmad was only 16 when World War I broke out and tried to repair Persia. But the revolution had left central authority weak. He declared neutrality during the war, but the Turks, Russians, and British just waltzed into Persia and fought their war without any mind. This permanently damaged Ahmad's reputation, and during the Russian Civil War, the Bolsheviks aided constitutionalist revolutionaries in establishing a Persian Soviet Republic in Rasht. In 1921, General Reza Khan decided to take matters into his own hands, seized control of the government, made nice with the Bolsheviks, and destroyed the now defenseless Persian Soviets. Reza Khan restored central authority to Persia and crushed an Arab revolt in Khuzestan, gaining immense popularity. The Shah saw the writing on the wall and left the country in 1923. 1925, the Majlis formally deposed Ahmad and made Reza Khan Shah. Pahlavi Iran. Reza Shah took the name Pahlavi from the Parthians of old. Committed to modernization, he built the Trans-Iranian Railway, promoting industrialization. He, however, also began the secularization of Iran, closing religious schools. As part of his reforms, he emancipated both Jews and women, and banned the use of veils. But despite being a constitutional monarch, Reza Shah ran parliament with an iron grip. He relied on his control of the military and civil service for support. His socially liberal attitudes, however, ran afoul with the socially conservative elements of the population. He was keen on fostering relations with Turkey, who had succeeded the defunct Ottoman Empire. The 1932 Tehran Conference finalized the long-contested border. Besides some minor adjustments, a sliver from Mount Ararat down the Karasu-Chayi River to the Aras was ceded to Turkey for a corridor to connect with Azerbaijan, as promised to the Turks by the Soviets in 1921. 1935, he officially requested that Persia be referred to as Iran. Since then, Iran has steadily replaced the use of Persia, though the largest ethnic group in the country continues to be Persians, speaking Persian, or Farsi, as it's called today. Emphasizing his country as the land of Aryans may have partly been done to cozy up with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis, as the Shah wished to pivot from troublesome Britain and Russia towards Germany. Maybe. This came back to bite him when in 1941 Britain and the USSR just straight up invaded to secure supply lines and deny Germany a war ally. The Shah was furious, but could do nothing. He finally abdicated in 1944. His son Mohammed succeeded. Mohammad Reza Shah was far more agreeable to Parliament than his father, but his first major challenge came in 1945. After the war, the British withdrew, but the Soviets remained and established Azeri and Kurdish puppet republics in the northwest. The Shah also feared a communist coup in Tehran. But in what may be considered one of the first events of the Cold War, the USA pressured the Reds to withdraw, and the Shah showed his strength when he rolled in and crushed the separatists. This victory, though, was undermined when in 1951, Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh announced he'd nationalized the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Britain did not agree, and soon the new Eisenhower administration in America feared this was a prelude to communist takeover. The American Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, orchestrated a coup in 1953 that saw Mossadegh replaced with General Fazlollah Zahedi. This damaged the Shah's reputation amongst both Iranian elites and the West. He resented this and pivoted towards social and economic reforms, befriending leftist factions in government. While a capable politician, he overstepped by opening trade relations with Israel in 1959, angering many Muslims in Iran and elsewhere. Beginning in the 1960s, the Shah embarked on an aggressive modernization campaign called the White Revolution. This included things like land reform, abolition of noble privileges, industrialization, urbanization, public secular education, religious tolerance, worker co-ops, social welfare programs, women's suffrage, infrastructure, nationalization of natural resources, a most ambitious endeavor. Iran experienced rapid economic growth in this period, and the Shah used this new revenue to enlarge the military and continue his reforms. 1971, he seized three strategically important islands in the Gulf, Abu Musa and Greater and Lesser Toumba, claimed by the United Arab Emirates. 1973, he declined to stand with the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, many of them Arab Muslim countries, when they embargoed the West due to the Yom Kippur War between Israel and Egypt and Syria. Soaring oil prices made Iran oodles of cash, but conservative Shia clerics were angry at the lack of solidarity with the Islamic world, and the Shah's reforms aggravated socially conservative and rural elements of society. He tried to change things too much, too quickly. The Shah harshly cracked down on his opposition, but the popular Ruhollah Khomeini was someone he could not silence. He was an Ayatollah, a high-ranking Shia scholar and jurist, and would become known as the Ayatollah to much of the world, and he used his influence to foment dissent with the Shah's regime. 1977, protests began, and in 1978 the situation turned violent, with anti-royalist militants murdering some 400 people. Public dissatisfaction with the Shah's regime increased, and millions marched through Iran in protest. The revolution expanded to include not only Khomeini's ilk, but also Islamists, liberals hoping for more democracy, and socialists hoping for more socialism. Even the United States had lost faith in the Shah, and thought Khomeini might be a better figure to lead a democratic, anti-communist Iran. No American support, his military paralyzed, and facing widespread collapse of popularity, the Shah had little choice but to flee into exile January 16, 1979. Khomeini was invited back from exile, and the hope was moderate Shapur Bakhtiar would head a democratic government, while Khomeini would play the part of spiritual leader of Iran. But the Ayatollah would be no puppet, and he immediately denounced Bakhtiar and leveraged his immense popularity, seizing control of the country. The military surrendered rather than murder civilians, and February 11th, the monarchy was officially dissolved. That November, a new constitution was promulgated, establishing the Jumhuriye Islamiya Iran, Islamic Republic of Iran. Khomeini and his men created an Islamic theocratic republic. While the people elect their parliament and president, all legislation and candidates must be approved by a guardian council appointed by the supreme leader. Theoretically, the supreme leader is accountable to an assembly of Islamic experts, but he has never lost their confidence. The supreme leader therefore rules as virtual autocrat. Not long after the constitution was signed, radical students took the American embassy in Tehran hostage, as the U.S. had given the Shah asylum. Originally seeing this as a victory, Khomeini relented in 1981 with their release. To hear my father tell it, the feckless Carter administration allowed the hostage crisis, while the election of the far more hawkish Ronald Reagan in 1980 scared the Ayatollah. Others say Carter was negotiating in the background the whole time. Probably a little column A, little column B. America, however, agreed to leave Iran alone, at least on paper, and had more pressing concerns with the Reds. Khomeini's Iran had showed it would not play the Cold War power game, and professed a desire to unify all Islam against both East and West. Easier said than done, as much of the rest of the Islamic world was Sunni. Ironically, Shiite-majority Iraq invaded Iran under Sunni President Saddam Hussein in 1980, hoping to detach Arabistan and lap up all that tasty oil. This started the Iran-Iraq War. I've seen it called the First Gulf War, a title usually reserved for the 1990 conflict. Either way, even if he didn't want to play, the Ayatollah couldn't avoid the Cold War, as the Soviets aided Hussein, as the Reds didn't trust a radical Islamic regime any more than the USA did. And, even though he wasn't supposed to, Uncle Sam just couldn't resist selling guns to Iran illegally to undermine his rivals in Moscow, leading to the Iran-Contra affair. So spiritually juiced up, Iranians literally ran into waves of bullets for their Islamic Valhalla. By 1988, with 500,000 dead, the UN mediated a peace between the two. Domestically, Khomeini made Sharia law the basis of Iran's government and rolled back the social reforms of the Shah. Strict social mores were enforced by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. Women's autonomy disappeared, as they did from the workforce, and forget about homosexuality. And despite their aid during the revolution, liberals, Democrats, and socialists had outlived their usefulness and were closely monitored by the regime's goons. Blasphemy against Islam became punishable by death. Educated professionals fled in droves, harming the economy. 1989, Khomeini died. He was almost 90, to widespread mourning. President Ali Khamenei, which, yes, is a different guy, succeeded as supreme leader. He inherited Khomeini's cult of personality, but knew he had to moderate international policy to develop Iran. His big focus was economic growth, and reached rapprochement with Saudi Arabia for their oil. A thorn in the side of the regime has been increased Iranian consumption of Western media, putting pressure on the government. Parliament is often split between reformists and conservatives, though all within the Islamic Republican framework. The regime, despite overtures of peace, has worked behind the scenes to foment trouble. Professing a goal of destroying Israel and aspiring to corral the Sunni Arabs under Shia Iran, the Islamic Republic likes neither the West nor most of its fellow Muslim countries, and in turn, they really don't like the Iranian regime. The 2001 terror attacks on the World Trade Center increased American suspicions of Iran. The big concern has been Iran developing its own nuclear program. The Obama administration was willing to permit Iran some nuclear power plants, but in 2018, the Trump administration didn't trust them and renewed sanctions. Not entirely unwarranted, and the Iranian regime has been funding and supplying militants all throughout the Middle East to just cause chaos for decades. Protests pop up every few years or so, creating a lot of excitement over what's next for Iran. 2020, the U.S. blasted Baghdad airport and killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, a ringleader of terrorist cells in the region. 2024, Israel struck the Iranian consulate in Damascus, targeting another Iranian military official for their support of Hezbollah and Hamas. The Iranians volleyed back. With the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria, Iran lost just about its only friend in the region. The walls continued closing in on Iran when in 2025 it was discovered Iran was enriching uranium to weapons grade, and Israel launched missiles against their facilities. The USA got in on the fun, fully setting its stance to aggressive. Israel and the United States had their casus belli to eliminate their longtime foe, and February 28, 2026, they launched just a sheer wave of hellfire against any military target they could find. When the dust settled, the supreme leader was dead, as were many other higher-ups. Khamenei's son Mojtaba has taken charge as the new supreme leader. So that leaves us to today, May 2026. Iran has lashed out and launched attacks against targets all over the Middle East, dragging the Saudis, Kuwait, and the UAE into the war. Israel and the USA had hoped a regime change would follow soon. Some call for Prince Reza Pahlavi to return as the new Shah. Looks just like his daddy, don't he? Rebel groups are also emboldened. Azeris, Baloch, Arabs, and especially Kurds, all who either want an independent country or to join a pre-existing one. No doubt the US and Israel thought the initial attack would cause Iran to roll over and play good boy. That didn't happen. While there is a ceasefire, Iran has blockaded the Strait of Hormuz using a combination of naval binds and missile strikes, and charges an exorbitant toll for ships to safely pass through. This is significant because some 20% of the world's daily oil supply flows through those waters, leading to a global energy crisis. Unable to fully break the blockade, the USA has responded with its own blockade of Iran. Understandably peeved, many countries have remarked that both the inciting strikes and Iran's toll constitute violations of international law. What's most interesting about this war, to me anyway, is that this represents another injury against what I call the neoliberal world order, an international consensus of things like free trade, democracy, capitalism, all that stuff. It's not any one person's or nation's fault. This consensus has been unraveling for decades now. Not to get into it, but observers have long recognized the rules apply to some nations and not others, and the more this happens, the weaker those rules become. Besides that, many people are worried the conflict could turn nuclear. Well, Iran doesn't have any nukes. Russia and China might get involved, but I doubt they'd send nukes. Plus, Russia's a little busy at the moment. Is this World War III? Maybe. Personally, I think the past couple years have seen the prelude to a third world war, as the 1936 invasion of Ethiopia, the 1937 invasion of China, even the Spanish Civil War were lead-ins to World War II. Time will tell. Stay safe. History's happening right now. That we should live in such eventful times, I'll just keep making videos. Oh man, that was Iran. It was a little heavy at the end, but I had fun. Next time, if you're watching this as it comes out, I'll be returning to Africa, Kenya specifically. If this is finally in order in the future, next on the docket is Afghanistan. See you there.